Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, starting with Tezayin Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Our Gemara previously brought a brisa in regards to making mechitzos. 3 different categories of mechitza. There it's talking about when a person has a vine, a grapevine on one side, and he wants to plant another zera. So he has to make a mechitza, so there's no maris ayin. So here the brisa states the first category is where you make a mechitza of lavud. We'll call it a mechitza of lavud, where let's say you have even poles, things that are very narrow, and between these poles are less than 3 tfachim. Since it's lavud, it's considered to be enclosed, closed up, therefore it's a valid mechitza. The second category is if you have 3 tfachim up to 4, but not including 4 tfachim as closed, then, so long as it's oyme meruba la parutz, you can go ahead and plant opposite that wall. Opposite that wall is a valid mechitza. However, if the gaps are greater than the 3 tfachim, let's say it's 3 tfachim closed and then it's greater, 3.5 tfachim gaps, so then it's parutz meruba ala oymed, you cannot even plant opposite the oymed. The third category is that you have between 4 tfachim and eser amos. There we say that not only can you plant opposite the oymed, even if it's meruba, if it's parutz meruba ala oymed, you can still plant opposite the parutz, because we say it's a valid wall. The Gemara now wants to explain this brisa. Now, based on the fact that there's a machlokes of whether lavud is less than 3 tfachim according to Rabbanan, or less than 4 tfachim according to Rishon and Gamliel, the Gemara wants to explain the brisa according to this machlokes. Do we say that since according to Rabbanan we say lavud is less than 3 tfachim, whereby less than 3 tfachim is not in itself significant, only 3 tfachim or more would be significant, whereby we would say oymed meruba ala parutz, there the wall, the closed wall itself would have significance. Or according to the Chachamim, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, if it's less than 4 tfachim, only less than 4 tfachim is not significant, but 4 tfachim and more is significant. The Gemara now explains this understanding to then interpret the brisa as follows. Pachos mishloisha mani. The first of the 3 categories of mechitza, we said, is a mechitza that has poles, let's say, with less than 3 tfachim in between. Ask the Gemara, Mani, who is the author? Who is the one who is then authoring this statement? Answers the Gemara, Rabbanon he. It's the Rabbanon. The Amrei Pachas Mishloisha Aminan Lavud Shloisha Lo Yamin Lav. Because the Rabbanon say less than 3 tfachim is lavud, more than 3 tfachim is not lavud. So therefore you have the classical mechitza of lavud as if it is closed, whereby you go ahead and have a mechitza you can then plant on the other side. A Masechet, the Gemara then says, but the Seif of the brisa implies otherwise. Kol shehu shloisha umishloisha ve'ad arbo. The second category, here the Gemara calls it the Seif, it's the Seif of the Reisha, meaning of the first category, is the second category where it says when you have a wall that's 3 to up to 4, but not including 4 tfachim, that is closed. There it says if you have a greater gap, then you cannot even plant opposite that which is closed, the oymed. So the Gemara says, who is this statement going like? Ason le'Rishon Gamliel, the Omar Pachos me'arbo lavud. This goes according to the opinion of Rishon Gamliel, who says less than 4 tfachim is lavud. That's why over here it's from 3 up to 4, but not including 4 tfachim. The Rabbanon, because if it's the Rabbanon, then mishloisha ve'ad arbo, then 3 up until 4. Why is it only up until 4? It should go even beyond. Even in the third case where it says between 4 tfachim and eser amos, it should not be any different than 3 tfachim, because according to Rabbanan, only less than 3 tfachim is lavud. That means 3 tfachim or more is significant, whereby you should be able to plant opposite that amud. Shloisha ve'arbo chadhu. The Gemara says, according to Rabbanan, 3 and 4 are really one of the same. And therefore, again, according to the Rabbanon, it shouldn't make any difference that it's 3 up until 4, but not including 4. Even it's going to be 3 all the way beyond 4 and up. It would also be something that's considered to be significant as a wall, as an oimed. So the Gemara is left with a contradiction in the Brisa. The first part, the first category implies that we go like the Rabbanon. The second category implies that we go like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Answers the Gemara, Amar Abaye Midreisha Rabbanon Seifa Nami Rabbanon. We can explain the whole Brisa, both the Reisha and the Seifa, to be like the Rabbanon. Umoidi Rabbanon dekol lemishra kinegdoi iika makam arba chashiv v'iloi loi chashiv. The Rabbanon, when they're talking about lavud in the first case, in the first category, less than 3 tfachim makes lavud, therefore the wall is valid. But in the second case, they'll agree that it's true if it's only between 3 and up to 4 tfachim, and it's going to be a parutz meruba al ha'oimed, that you cannot plant opposite the amud, because that's not going to be significant. What's significant is only 4 tfachim, because 4 tfachim and greater is considered to be a valid wall. So even though parutz meruba al ha'oimed, then you still have a wall of 4 tfachim or more. So therefore, you can go ahead and plant even across the opposite of the parutz. So again, according to Abaye, the entire Brisa can be explained according to the Rabbanon. V'Rava Omar, Rava explains the Brisa mid'sefer Shem Gamliel, Reisha not Misra Shem Gamliel. He can explain the entire Brisa according to Rav Shem Gamliel. We said, but the first part of the Brisa implies like the Rabbanon. Explains Rava. V'chi Omar Rav Shem Gamliel Amrinon Lavud. When Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says lavud, that it's less than 4 tfachim is lavud, hani mili lemala. That's talking about when you have above, like a kara, that goes from one side, one end of the mavui, but it doesn't extend all the way to the other end of the mavui. So if it's within 4 tfachim, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says lavud. Aval lemata havale kemechitza shagedim boikim bo. Lo yamrin lavud. But if it's going to be down below, even Rabbi Shimon Gamliel will agree with the Rabbanon that you cannot have a mechitza that is less than 3 tfachim space, because then you have gedim, young goats that can go through. So therefore it would be an invalid type of mechitza. So we can explain again the Brisa, both according to the Rabbanon, the Abaye, or according to the Rava, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Gemara now brings the following proof. Going back, we had a machloikis as to how to explain whether parutz ka'oimed is indeed a mechitza or not. We know that parutz that is greater than the oimed is not a valid mechitza. But what about parutz ka'oimed? There we had 2 different opinions. Rav Papa said that it is a valid mechitza, whereas Rav Huna Bered of Yoshua said that it's not a valid mechitza. Toshma, the Gemara wants to bring the following proof for Rav Huna Bered of Yoshua, and a tiyufta, a refutation on Rav Papa, as follows. Toshma, defonois halolu sherubon psochim v'chaloinois. There are walls that the majority are openings and windows. Mutter, you can go ahead and metaltil within those walls. Ubilvad sheyeh omeid meruba ala parutz, providing that it is omeid, that which is standing is greater than that which is gaps. So now the Gemara is bothered with a technical problem over here. Within the Brisa itself, there's a stira, because at first it says that there is the majority of openings and chaloinos. And then it goes on to say that providing that there's more oimed than parutz. So it's a contradiction. Says the Gemara, Sharuba and Salka Daita, do you mean to say that it's roiv, the psochim and chaloinos? That would already imply that's parutz meruba la oimed. Says the Gemara, no. Ela sheriba bohen psochim v'chaloinos muter. Ubilvashi oimed meruba la parutz. No, it means to say that there are many, sheriba means there are many psochim and chaloinos, but you have to have oime meruba la parutz in order for it to be a valid wall. Diuk ha kaparutz aser. But if it's the same, that oimed is kiparutz, then it would be aser. Says the Gemara, tiyufta de Rav Papa Tiyufta, we have a refutation now in Rav Papa who said that if it's the same, that which is oimei, that which is closed, and that which is porush, which is a gap, is the same, it's still valid. So we have a tiyufta on Rav Papa. Says the Gemara, v'hilchas gavasi de Rav Papa. The halacha is like Rav Papa. In fact, the Gemara, tiyufta v'hilchasa. You told me now a refutation of Rav Papa, and now you tell me the halacha is like him. Answers the Gemara in. That's true. Mishum dedaika masnisin kavasa, because we can medaik the Mishnah like Rav Papa, and the Mishnah is more authoritative than the Brisa. So therefore, the diuk of the Mishnah is then going to be machriya, the halacha like Rav Papa, over that diuk of the Brisa as follows. This nan, it says in the Mishnah, Lo yu pirtzois yiseirois al habinyan. You cannot have the openings, the gaps, greater than that which is closed. So we can make a diuk. You're going to have greater gaps than the binyan. Ha kebinyan mutter. But if it's the same, then it's mutter. Just like Rav Papa said, if it's oimed keparutz, it's mutter, and therefore the halach is like Rav Papa. The Gemara now brings the next Mishnah. We spoke about the previous Mishnah that if there are people who are traveling before Shabbos, so before Shabbos comes in, they want to make an encampment. So they find themselves in a bika, which is halachically a place where you cannot metaltal midrabon and dalid amois, because it has a din of a karmelis. So they go ahead and they made a makeshift type of wall with kalim of a behema, for example, like a saddle or the pillow that goes on the saddle and other things. Now the Mishnah talks about other ways of making a mechitza for people who want to encamp while they are traveling. Mekifin shloisha chavolim ze lemala mizeh veze lemala mizeh. You can make a mechitza with ropes by making them horizontally, by making from the ground to the rope less than 3 tfachim, and then between that rope and the second rope less than 3 tfachim, and then between that rope and the next rope less than 3 tfachim. So then you would have altogether less than 9 tfachim, whereby you'd have to then have the rope itself to be mashlim. Ubilvad shelo yeh ben chevel lechaveroi shloshet tfachim. Shir chavolim, the entire shir of all of the chavolim together, v'oivyon yeser al tefach kedei sheyeh hakol asar tfachim. To get to the asar tfachim again, you'd have a little bit less than 9 tfachim, one rope above the other, one within less than 3 tfachim. Then you'd have all of the ropes combined to be a tefach and a little bit more, to make 10 tfachim, a height of the minimum size of a wall. The Mishnah goes on to say another type of wall they can make is this time vertically. Instead of being erev, you can make a shesi wall as follows. Makifin bekanim. You can take reeds and put it into the ground. Ubilvad shelo yeh bein kane lechaveiro shloshet tfachim. Provided that there are not a distance of 3 tfachim between. There has to be less than 3 tfachim between every kane. The Mishnah goes on to say, Bishayara dibru, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says all of this, these makeshift types of walls, the mechitzas gruois that we're talking about, of either shesi or of erev, those are for people who are traveling in a chabura of 3, a shayara, a caravan. V'chachamim oimrim loy dibru b'shayara el b'hoive. The chachamim said that really it's even talking about an individual who's traveling. But that which it says shayara is only an example, a typical case where people who travel together need to make such a wall. The Mishnah goes on to say, "Kol mechitza she'ena shel shesi v'shel erev eina mechitza." Di Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is machmir, and he says, in order to be a valid wall, it has to have both shesi and erev together. V'chachamim oimrim echad mishnei dvarim. V'chachamim are most mekel, and they say that not only can you use either a shesi wall or an erev wall, but they say also that it can even be for an individual. It doesn't have to be for a shayara. And we'll soon see, the Gemara will tell us that the difference in this opinion and the Chachamim earlier is that this Chachamim holds even more mekil, that even if the individual is not traveling, he's in the city itself, he can still make such a wall for Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Rav Hu Hamnuna Amar Rav. Rav Hamnuna said in the name of Rav, Harei Omru Oimei Meruba ala Porutz B'Shesi Have Oimed. He made a statement saying that you have Oimed ala Porutz in a Shesi wall, then we say it's a valid wall. Now we're not talking about lavud. We're talking about where you have a Shesi wall, vertical boards, but you have Oimed, that's Meruba ala Porutz, valid. That Rav Hamnuna said in the name of Rav. But boy, Rav Hamnuna be'erev mai. But if it's going to be a wall that's horizontal, then do we also say Oimed Meruba ala Porutz is valid or not? Now again, we're not talking about a lavud. We're not talking about less than 3 tefachim apart. We're talking about where you have greater than 3 tefachim. Do we say that this concept of Oimed Meruba ala Porutz is also valid with such a horizontal wall where you have gaps in between the boards? That is what L'chara Rav Hamnuna is coming to ask. Omer Abaye now wants to prove from a diuk of our Mishnah to explain. Omer Abaye, Toshma, Shir chavolim ve'oivyon yeser al tefach shura kol asar tefachim. Our Mishnah stated gabe chavolim, if you make a mechitza of erev, of horizontal ropes, so our Mishnah stated that you can do so by making it so that you'll have less than 3 tefachim apart, and then the chevel, all chavolim together would be a little bit more than 1 tefach, then making asar tefachim. So now Abaye wants to make a diuk based on this Mishnah. Isa, if it's indeed true that you can say Oimei Meruba ala Porutz, then Lama li Yeser al Tefach. Why do we have to come to the case of 3 tefachim in between each rope, little less than 3 tefachim between each rope, with the ropes combined to be a little bit more than 1 tefach? Li'ave pachos mishloisha vechevel mashuhu. Pachos mishloisha. V'chevel mashu pachos mi'arba, v'chevel mashu. Abaye says you can make the case different. You can make the case where there is going to be a distance of less than 3 tefachim between two of the spaces, and between the third space there'll be less than 4 tefachim, whereby each chevel will be only a koshehu. So now you have the concept, if you went with this case, of Oimei Meruba ala Porutz, because if you have 2 gaps that are less than 3 tefachim, so then you have lavud. So that combines to be a little bit less than 6 tefachim, which is greater than the gap, that is a little bit less than 4 tefachim. So now you have a case of Oimei Meruba ala Porutz. And yet we see that the Mishnah doesn't bring such a case. So it must be that we do not say Oimei Meruba ala Porutz when it comes to a horizontal wall, a wall of Erev. That's Abaye's proof from our Mishnah. Ask the Gemara v'tizbara, do you really think so? Hi, pachos me'arba hechi mukim lo. Where would you then put the gap that is less than 4 tefachim? I mukim le tatoi. If you're going to put it on the bottom, meaning between the first horizontal rope above the ground, and it's going to be a little less than 4 tefachim. So says the Gemara, that would not be valid because young goats can go through. So that's not a possibility. If you're going to say it's talking about the top rope, then you'll have the avir that is up to the rakia, and on the other side, beneath it, less than 4 tefachim, which will mevatil the rope because you have more than 3 tefachim on either side. So that's not a possibility either. So maybe you'll say imukim lei b'mitzei. You'll put the rope in the middle, and that means between the first and second rope is the distance of a little bit less than 4 tefachim. Then havalei oimid meruba ala porutz mishtei ruchos. Then you're going to have a situation where above is going to be a little bit less than 3 tefachim, below is a little bit less than 3 tefachim. So only the combination, which we're saying is closed, the combination, because a little bit less than 6, is greater than that which is going to be porutz. And the Gemara says Shmas mina oimem rubal aporitz mishtei ruchos have oime. We don't find that only the combination of the two closed places on opposite sides, combination would be greater than that which is parutz. Elo Rav Hamnuna hochi kami boile. Rather, we have to explain Rav Hamnuna's question as follows. Kigon da isi machzeles da have zayin umashu. We're talking about where you have a mat that is 7 tfachim high. V'chakak ba gimel, and you cut a piece that was gimel. V'shovak ba dalit umashu, and you left with 4 tfachim umashu as a space. So what we're talking about is like this. You put a machzeles of 7 tfachim, okay, and you left the bottom piece, and you cut a space between that bottom piece and what is left to be 4 tfachim of machzeles. So you now have in between 3 tfachim. So you have over here a situation where you have the machzeles itself that's left with 4 tfachim, and then you have the space that is going to be a space of 3 tfachim, and is a little bit less than 3 tfachim on the ground. So that means to say you have lavud from the ground, which is closed. Then on top of that, you have then this piece of machzeles that was cut, which then has a space between the actual machzeles, the rest of the machzeles, and that's going to be 3 tfachim, which is a gap. And then you have on top of that a machzeles of 4 tfachim. So really you have the 4 tfachim and a little bit less than the 3 tfachim, which is closed. That's going to be greater than that which is porous in between the 3 tfachim. So that was Rav Hamnuna's question. Rav Ashi explains Rav Hamnuna's question differently. Mechitza tluya iboilei. He was asking if you have a mechitza that is tluya, that is tolui, that is hanging. Is that going to be valid? If you have a situation where you have a machzeles of 10 tfachim high, but you put it above 3 tfachim from the ground, so do we say that that's going to be a valid mechitza or not? Kideboy minei Rav Tavla meirav, like Rav Tavla asked Rav. In other words, the question he's asking is, do we say that since it's above 3 tfachim, there's a gap, but you have a machzeles of 10 tfachim, so maybe we'll say oime merubal porutz, and therefore it's insignificant that you have the pirza down below. So it's really a mechitza that's tluya. That's the shayla of Rav Hamnuna. And this is the same shayla that Rav Tavla asked Rav. Mechitza tluya mau shetatir bechurba. Can you take those mechitzas, meaning that have not gone down, they start from the ceiling, they start going down, but they don't go down all the way, they're called mechitza tluya. Is that going to be valid? Omar lei ein mechitza tluya materes ela b'mayim. We do not matir a mechitza tluya except for that which is going to be for the water. Because kalhu shekilu chacham b'mayim, they made a kula. For example, the Mishnah will tell us in the 8th parak, when a person has a mirpeset, he'll have a balcony that is on top of water, and water is beneath it, and he wants to then draw water, but he can't do so because the water is considered to be a karmelis. So how can he draw water into his mirpeset, which is a reshus hayachid? So if he makes a hole with 4 by 4 tfachim, and he makes mechitzas that are 10 tfachim, even though there are mechitzas that are tluya, he'll be able to then draw water from this water and bring it up to him. It'll all be considered to be a reshus hayachid. So there, the chum were makeup gabe mayim, but in a regular case, mechitza tluya is invalid. The Gemara now brings our Mishnah that states that if you have a mechitza made out of shesi, that's going to be reeds within 3 tfachim, less than 3 tfachim apart, so you can make this type of wall. The Mishnah then stated that Rabbi Yehuda says this is by shayara, when you have 3 or more travelers. Ask the Gemara, b'shayara in b'yachid loy. This is only by travelers of a chabur of 3 will be valid to make such a wall of a shesi alone. But if it's an individual, then it's not going to be valid. Vehatanyo, behold, it says in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol Mechitzo Shabbos Lo Hitiu Liyochid Yoiser Mi Beis Osayim. They did not permit this type of mechitza for an individual if it's going to be for a space that is greater than Beis Osayim, which is 500 amos. Mashma, that is less than Beis Osayim, it would be valid for individual, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Answers the Gemara Kedamar of Nachman v'Item of Rabbi bar Abaye. Lo nitzrecha ela litin lahen kol tzarkan. We're talking about where they only permitted it to give them kol tzarkan when you have, it's going to be shayara. But if it's not going to be shayara, that's when Rabbi Yehuda said that even an individual would be able to then go ahead and then metaltil if it's going to be less than Beis Osayim. Therefore, that's what we said, and we can apply it to here as well, that again, an individual could go ahead and metaltil less than Beis Osayim. The Gemara asks, where did Rav Nachman, or if you want to say it's Rabbi bar Abai, say the statement originally that we want to apply it to our case? It's actually from our Mishnah. Ahod Disnan. Kol mechitza she'ena shel shesi ve'erev eina mechitza. Di Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says it's not going to be a valid mechitza unless it has both erev and shesi. But just an erev wall or just a shesi wall is not going to permit you to walk to then metaltal inside of it. Those are the words of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Umiyam Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Hachi. The Gemara says, is this what he said? V'hatanya, but he himself said in the following brisa, echad yachid ve'echad shayara lechavolim. Whether it's an individual or it's going to be a group of 3 people who are traveling, you can use a mechitz of chavolim, which is just erev. Uma bein yachid l'shayara. What is the distinction between a yachid, an individual, and a chabur of 3? Yachid noisnin loy beis sosayim. For both an individual or 2 people are traveling, you can give them only up to Beis Osayim. That's the space that can allow them to make this wall, to enclose such a space. But if it's Gimel, Nasu Shayara, v'nosnem Beis Sheish, Di Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, but if it's 3, meaning a Shayara, 3 travelers, then they can have 2 Beis Osayim for each one, a total of 6. If it's going to be 4 travelers, it can have a total of 8, and so on. So says the Gemara, on the one hand, we say that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda requires a mechitza that is both shesi and erev. On the other hand, in this brisa, he seems to say that even if it's not, even if it's just going to be a mechitza of erev, one can go ahead and metaltil it. If it's an individual or 2 people, then they can go ahead and metaltil if it's within Beis Osayim. If it's going to be 3 people, then they can have 6. Answers the Gemara to explain. One more opinion in this brisa. V'chachamim oimrim echad yachi ve'echad shayara noisnin lehem kol tzarkon ubilvash lo yeh beis osayim panui. The chachamim's opinion is that there's no distinction between a yachid and a shayara. Whether it's an individual or 3, a group of 3 that are traveling, they can all use a mechitza that's going to be like a makeshift mechitza, either with kana, that is going to be shesi, or a chevel, which is going to be erev. That's going to be enough, providing that there's not going to be a space that is panui of Beis Osayim. So now we're left again with the stira in Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. On the one hand, once again, in the Mishnah, he states you need a wall of shesi and erev. In this brisa, however, he indicates that even if it's not just both shesi and erev, it's one or the other, it would also be sufficient to provide a traveler, 1 of 2, can go ahead and make and have a space of Beis Osayim, and if it's 3, they can have 6. Answers the Gemara on Rav Nachman v'Item Rabbi bar Abai. It was Rav Nachman, or if you want to say it's Rabbi bar Abai, that said over here, Lo nitzrecha ela litin lahen kol tzarkon. It was only stated only to give them all of their needs, meaning to say that when Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that you need to have a wall of shesin and erev, then he didn't put any limitation on it. Then he said you can go ahead and have as much as you need. But when you do not have both shesi ve'erev, it's one or the other, then you'll have these limitations. Again, 1 or 2 individuals are traveling, can have up to a Beis Osayim. If it's going to be 3, then 6. If it's going to be 4, then 8, and so on.